Her wrist was still in her mother's grip when Roman placed the cash on the table. The trailer smelled like sour beer, cigarette ash, and frying grease that had soaked into the walls for years. A naked bulb swung above them, throwing weak yellow light across cracked linoleum and a kitchen table scarred by old burns. Clara stood barefoot beside the sink, a thin young woman in a faded gray dress, her dark skin almost silver under the trembling light. She did not flinch when her mother yanked her forward again, but her shoulders tightened, and that small movement told more truth than any cry could have. She could not hear the slurred words spilling from her mother's mouth, yet she had spent her whole life reading violence before it landed. Marla Foster smiled with broken lipstick and desperate eyes. She cooks, cleans, doesn't talk back. You want quiet? She's perfect. Her laugh was ugly, wet, and fast. Can't hear a thing. Might as well be furniture. Roman Volkov did not sit. He filled the narrow kitchen like something built from black wool and cold steel, 6'3" in a charcoal overcoat, his leather gloves still on, his face unreadable beneath the hard planes of old discipline. Men feared him in clubs, in warehouses, in courtrooms bought with cash and threats. Tonight he stood in a trailer 20 miles outside the city, staring at a drunken mother selling her own daughter for less than he had spent on a bottle of scotch the night before. Clara's eyes rose to him only once. Not pleading, not trusting, measuring. That was what made him pause. Most people looked at Roman and saw danger first. Clara looked at his mouth, then his hands, then the money, then the door. She was mapping the room, calculating exits, counting intentions. Her face was calm, but her fingers pressed half moons into her own palm, as if pain were the one language nobody had to translate. Marla snatched the stack of bills before Roman answered. 12,000, she said, shoving it into a coffee can beneath the sink. No refunds. Roman finally looked at her. I didn't ask for your joke. The room changed at once. Marla's grin slipped. One of Roman's men near the door lowered his eyes. Even in silence, power had a temperature, and Roman's was winter. Clara watched his mouth carefully when he spoke, reading what she could. Bought. Go. Now. She knew enough of those words from years of being discussed like an object in front of strangers. Her jaw tightened. Shame rose in her chest, hot and familiar, but beneath it lived something harder, refusal. If she had to walk out of this trailer with a monster, she would not walk out as a broken thing. Marla grabbed Clara's chin and turned her face toward Roman as if presenting merchandise. Pretty enough cleaned up. Strong back. Obedient when handled right. Roman moved before anyone else did. He caught Marla's wrist and peeled her hand away from Clara's face with such controlled force that the older woman gasped and nearly stumbled into the counter. It was not a warning. It was protection, immediate and undeniable. Roman stepped between them, cutting Clara out of her mother's reach as cleanly as a blade. His voice dropped low, and somehow that made it crueler. You took my money, he said. You don't touch her again. The chandelier light fell cold across the marble floor, turning the entrance hall into something that looked more like a courtroom than a home. Clara stood just behind Roman's shoulder, one hand curled against the seam of her plain black dress, her face still pale where her mother had nearly struck her. Marla, breathing hard and smelling of cheap liquor and old cigarettes, tried to recover her pride by lifting her chin. But the room had already shifted. The guards near the door looked at Roman, not at her. The housekeeper at the far end of the corridor had stopped pretending not to watch. Power had chosen a side. Marla gave one bitter laugh, rough as broken glass. You think money makes her yours? Roman did not move. Clara did. It was small at first, so small that a weaker man would have missed it. 2 fingers touched the back of Roman's sleeve. Not clinging, directing. Then she stepped around him with a strange, sudden certainty and looked not at her mother's face, but at her coat pocket. Marla's hand went there too quickly. That was the first thing. The second was Clara's expression. Deafness had taught her to study what other people wasted. Breath patterns, eye flickers, the angle of shoulders, the rhythm of panic moving beneath skin. Her gaze sharpened. She crossed to the writing table by the wall, grabbed a hotel notepad and pen, and wrote in quick, hard strokes. Check her left pocket. Roman read it once. Then he looked up. Marla turned for the door. Stop. One word. Flat. Final. A guard moved in front of her before she took a second step. Marla cursed, jerking back, but Roman was already reaching into the pocket Clara had marked. His hand came out holding a silver key and a folded card wrapped in a receipt from a pawn shop on Fulton Street. The room went silent. Marla's mouth opened, then closed. Roman unfolded the card. It was not addressed to Clara. It was not even meant for this house. A room number, a time, and one line written in block letters. Make sure the girl stays quiet. For the first time since she had stumbled through those doors, real fear entered Marla's eyes. Not outrage, not drunken fury. Fear. Roman lifted the card slowly. Who gave you this? I don't know what that is, she snapped too fast. Clara was already writing again. She came here for more than money. Roman read that, and something colder settled over him. Part of him had assumed the ugly little scene was exactly what it looked like, a drunken mother trying to squeeze more cash out of a bad bargain. Ugly, but simple. Clara had just destroyed the comfort of that assumption. She was not reacting in panic. She was observing, building a pattern, handing it to him piece by piece. And she was right, because now he could see what he had missed. Marla's shoes were wet, but it had not rained in hours. Her lipstick had been fixed recently. The receipt was time-stamped 23 minutes earlier from a pawn shop 10 blocks away, yet the woman had arrived as if she'd been dropped at the gate. She had met someone. Comment below if you've ever seen silence expose a lie faster than shouting. Roman stepped closer. Who sent you? Marla tried to sneer, but it trembled. Nobody sends me anywhere. The lie hung in the foyer like perfume over smoke, sweet for a second, rotten underneath. Marble held the last of the night's chill, and the grandfather clock by the stairs pressed each second forward with a hard, judicial patience. Marla's mouth had shaped the denial quickly, but Clara was no longer looking at her face. Her gaze had dropped to the woman's right sleeve, where a tiny crescent of silver thread clung near the cuff, bright against cheap black fabric. Not from the pawn shop. From a wool overcoat. Men's tailoring. Expensive. Clara lifted her hand and touched 2 fingers to her own wrist, then pointed toward Marla's sleeve. Roman followed the gesture. His eyes narrowed, cold and exact. Marla instinctively hid her arm behind her back, and that small movement betrayed more than any argument could have. What is it? Roman asked, though he was no longer speaking to Marla. Clara stepped to the narrow writing table by the wall, found a cream note card and a fountain pen left beside a silver bowl of keys, and wrote in small, neat letters. Not alone. Someone in dark coat. Wool. Smelled like cedar and machine oil. Roman read it once. Then again. Cedar and machine oil. A different kind of silence settled over him then. One built not from confusion, but recognition. Men who worked with engines smelled of grease. Men who lived around weapons often carried oil in their cuffs and on their skin. Cedar was rarer. Cedar came from expensive closets, custom wardrobes, private offices lined with wood that tried to make violent men look civilized. Marla saw the shift in his face and made the mistake of rushing the moment. You're really going to take the word of a deaf girl over mine? The slap of that sentence against the room was uglier than a hand. Roman did not move at first. Clara did. Without flinching, without anger, she crossed to the brass umbrella stand near the door and crouched beside it. Her fingers slipped behind the base and returned with something folded into a tight square. A receipt. Not the pawn shop receipt. Different paper. Thicker. Greasy at one corner. She held it up. Marla's color drained so fast it seemed to pull the years from her face all at once. Roman took the paper from Clara and opened it flat beneath the chandelier light. A fuel receipt. Premium gas. Paid cash. Time-stamped 18 minutes before Marla had appeared at the gate. One location only 3 blocks from the estate's service road, the road no visitor used unless they had been told about it. On the back, written in hurried pen, was a plate number. Not Marla's handwriting. Block letters. Deliberate. Clara tapped the numbers, then pointed toward the dark window panes, then to Marla. Someone waited outside. The room went silent. Roman turned his head only slightly. Victor. A guard appeared almost at once from the corridor by the study, broad-shouldered and alert. Roman handed him the receipt. Take the East Drive. Quietly. Find the car tied to that plate. Don't approach until you see who's inside. Victor nodded once and disappeared. Marla's breathing changed. It became shallow, quick, animal. This is insane, she snapped. I came here for my daughter. Daughter. The words sounded borrowed now. Clara's eyes did not leave her. Steady. Certain. The silence after Marla's last claim felt heavier than the chandelier above them, as if the house itself had stopped to judge the word daughter. In the foyer, the marbles still held the cold of the night, and the only movement came from the slow pulse in Marla's throat and the faint tremor of Clara's fingers against the seam of her dress. Roman watched neither woman at first. His eyes had gone to Clara's face instead, to the strange calm there, to the fact that she had not looked confused when Marla lied, only tired. It struck him then with an intimacy more dangerous than anger. Clara was not simply afraid in his house. She was reading it, reading all of them, and she had been doing it from the beginning. A soft vibration broke the stillness. Roman took the phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen. One message from Victor. Car found. Driver still inside. Watching the house. The air changed. Marla saw it in his expression and moved before thought could dress itself as innocence. Her heel scraped the marble. Her shoulder turned toward the door. Stop. Just one word, low and flat. She froze mid-step. Roman did not raise his voice. That made the command feel worse. He handed the phone to one of the men near the staircase, then looked back at Marla as if he had finally placed her in the correct category. Not family, not nuisance, but risk. You did not come here alone. I don't know what you're talking about. The lie landed dead. Clara shifted then, and for the first time that night, she moved without waiting for anyone else to create the moment. She stepped away from the wall, crossed the foyer, and went not toward her mother but toward the narrow table beneath the mirror. On it sat a silver tray with untouched water and a folded hand towel from earlier. Her eyes flicked once to the front windows. Then she touched the glass pitcher. A faint tremor. Not from her hand. From the floor. A car engine outside. Idling. Roman saw the angle of her head, the stillness of her body, the precision of her attention. She wasn't hearing words. She was catching everything beneath them. He understood. Move her away from the front of the house, he said. One of his men reached for Clara, gentle but fast, to guide her toward the inner hall. Marla reacted at once. No, it tore out of her too sharply, too honestly. That was all Roman needed. He stepped between Clara and the front door, broad as a locked gate, while two men closed in on Marla. She fought them with the wild panic of someone who had just watched a plan collapse in real time. Her purse hit the floor. Lipstick rolled. A cheap compact cracked open across the marble. From the lining, a second phone slid free. The room went silent. Roman bent, picked it up, and looked at the screen. No lock. A message already open. Is she inside? Confirm when he's alone. Marla's face emptied. Clara did not flinch. She only looked at the broken compact, then at her mother, as if some last private hope had finally been stripped of costume. Roman's jaw hardened, but when he turned, it was not toward Marla first. It was toward Clara. The message on the screen seemed to drain the heat from the foyer faster than winter air ever could. Marble reflected the chandelier in fractured gold, but nobody in the house looked up at the light. All attention narrowed to that second phone in Roman's hand, to the single sentence glowing there like a loaded weapon, and to the woman whose painted mouth had finally run out of lies. Clara stood near the bottom of the staircase, shoulders straight despite the faint tremor in her fingers, and for the first time since Roman had brought her into this house, pity no longer moved in her eyes when they rested on her mother. Something older did. Something exhausted. Roman lifted the phone a little higher, not for drama, not for threat, but for judgment. His gaze stayed on Marla. Cold. Precise. The kind of cold that had ended men who mistook charm for protection. You sold her, he said, and then you sold this house with her in it. Marla's knees nearly gave way, but panic made her louder than weakness ever could. I didn't know what they were going to do, she blurted, voice cracking against the walls. They only wanted information. Schedules. When you were home, when you were alone. I owed money. Roman, listen to me, I was drowning. The excuse landed and died. Clara watched her mother's mouth move with a stranger's desperation. It was a face she knew too well, the pleading that came only after damage, the tears that appeared only when consequences arrived first. Years of cheap perfume, empty cupboards, slammed doors, and promises traded for bottles seemed to pass behind her still expression. Then she raised one hand slowly and signed with brutal clarity. How much? Marla stared at her, blinking through smeared mascara. What? Clara signed again, sharper this time. How much did you take? Roman looked from Clara's hands to Marla's face. He did not understand the signs themselves, but he understood accusation when he saw it. So did Marla. Shame moved over her features like something crawling under the skin. 25,000, she whispered. The number settled over the room with a different kind of violence. Not the violence of guns or fists, the violence of arithmetic. A daughter priced lower than a luxury watch, higher than a week's liquor, reduced to a debt line and a transfer. Clara closed her eyes once. Just once. When they opened again, whatever soft hope had survived in her was gone for good. Roman's voice dropped lower. Who do you owe? Marla hesitated. That was the mistake. A single nod from Roman sent two men from the hallway forward. They did not touch her roughly. They did not need to. Fear had already done the work. One of them took the phone, the other the compact, and within seconds the room had shifted from domestic scandal to controlled interrogation. Name, Roman said. Marla's breathing turned shallow. Victor Sayeg. The silence that followed was not empty. It was dangerous. Even Clara felt the change before she understood it. Roman did not move, yet the air around him hardened. Victor was not a bookie or some gutter lender. He was old blood from a rival network, a man patient enough to poison a house before trying to burn it. Marla had not simply brought disgrace to the doorstep. She had opened a path under the foundation. The grandfather clock in the West Hall counted 3 dry clicks before anyone in the foyer breathed again. Winter draft curled under the front doors, stirring the hem of Clara's black dress. But the deeper chill had come from the name Marla had spoken. Victor Sayeg. It did not belong in a household like a rumor. It belonged like a blade slipped under a pillow, silent, intimate, meant for night. Roman gave no order at first. That was what made the men nearest the staircase go rigid. His stillness was never empty. It was calculation under stone. Then his gaze shifted past Marla, past the broken compact glinting on the marble, and landed on Clara's left hand. A faint dusting of white clung to the side of her thumb. Flour. Not from the kitchen. The kitchen staff used yellow cornmeal on the breadboards at night, and everyone in the house knew it. This was pale, almost silver under the chandelier. Masonry dust. Clara saw him notice it. Her eyes sharpened. Then, with a controlled movement that seemed too deliberate to be fear, she touched 2 fingers to her own wrist, then pointed down the west corridor. Not a plea, not confusion, a direction. Marla frowned. What is she doing? Roman did not answer. Clara had used gestures before, small practical ones, requests, warnings about boiling water or a cracked tray. This was different. There was force in it. Intention. She stepped away from the foyer wall, crossed to a narrow console table, and with one quick motion dragged her fingertip through the thin layer of polished dust on its surface. A shape appeared. A square. Then another line beneath it. Cellar door. The room went silent in a new way. She's guessing. Marla said too quickly, but the words collapsed under their own weight. Clara did not even look at her. She drew one more mark, 4 short strokes, then one longer one crossing them. 5. Roman's jaw tightened. The old wine cellar entrance behind the west pantry had been sealed from regular use months ago during repairs. Only a handful of men even knew the passage still opened into the service tunnels beneath the house. 5 guards had rotated that lower level over the last week. Clara took one step backward and pressed her palm lightly to the wall beside the console. Then she knocked twice with her knuckles. Hollow, not the wall itself. A memory of sound. A message. At last Roman spoke, his voice low enough to make everyone else lean toward it. Who was on West Corridor rotation after midnight? Gio answered from near the stairs. Merrick. Then Dimo at 2. Bring them both. 2 men moved instantly. Shoes struck marble. A door opened somewhere deeper in the house. Fast footsteps split in opposite directions. Clara turned again toward Roman. Her breathing had gone shallow, but not from panic. She was searching his face with the hard concentration of someone trying to force understanding across a gap bigger than language. Then she lifted her hand, mimed a tray balanced at waist level, and tipped her head toward the floor. Roman understood before anyone else did. She heard it while serving. Marla's face drained. This is absurd. But it was not absurd. It fit too neatly. Clara moved through the house, where powerful men forgot to lower their voices. They had all treated her silence like emptiness. Midnight settled over the estate with the pressure of a locked hand. Outside, sleet tapped the tall windows in thin, brittle bursts, and the security lights threw pale bars across the driveway like prison stripes. Inside, the house had gone deceptively still. Men were moving now because Roman had ordered it, not loudly, not carelessly, but with the disciplined speed of people who understood that one wrong minute could cost more than money. Somewhere under that polished silence, a trap was already tightening. Clara felt it before she saw it. Not through sound, through rhythm. A maid's life had trained her to read interruption better than speech. Doors left half open. A lamp burning in a room no one used. A body standing too straight when everyone else was trying to look useful. She crossed the back corridor with a folded tablecloth over one arm, the costume of harmlessness still protecting her better than any gun, and paused when she saw the pantry boy near the service entrance. He was not one of theirs. The jacket was right, the tray was right, but his shoes were too clean, and his eyes kept sliding toward the alarm panel mounted beside the kitchen archway. Clara did not call out. She moved. One step back. Hand up. Sharp knock against the copper stockpot hanging by the prep table. The clang split the corridor. The fake pantry boy flinched and lunged for the panel. At the same instant, the lights in the east wing snapped out. A second later, the house generator stuttered, coughed, and failed to catch. Darkness poured through half the mansion. So that was the plan. Not poison now. Extraction. From the foyer, men shouted. Footsteps broke into a run. Roman security would rush toward the outage, exactly where they were meant to go. Clara saw the shape of it in a single cold flash. Draw the guards east, open a path west, take Roman in the confusion, or kill him trying. She turned and ran toward the servants' stairwell. Not away from danger. Toward Roman. At the top landing, she nearly collided with him. Gun in hand, jaw set, coat thrown over one shoulder, he looked carved out of winter itself. Two men were behind him, both armed, both waiting for instructions. Clara caught his sleeve hard enough to stop him, then pointed not toward the dark east wing but down, then west, then made a cutting motion across her throat. West Hall, one guard asked. Roman looked at her eyes, not her hands. Basement route, he said. He believed her. That choice changed everything. He sent both guards east as decoys, knowing the enemy would expect him to move with protection. Then he took the west corridor with Clara alone, cutting through the old wine passage beneath the library where the walls narrowed and the air smelled of limestone and dust. It was the one route in the house no outsider should have known, which was why the first man stepped from the shadows with a silenced pistol already raised. Roman fired first. Stone spat powder. The attacker dropped. Clara jerked backward, pulse hammering against her throat, but Roman did not stop to look at the body. He caught her wrist and pulled her behind a column just as a second shot punched into the plaster where her head had been a heartbeat earlier. The enemy had known the passage. Cold marble pressed through Clara's thin shoes as another shot cracked the air and died inside the hidden corridor. Dust drifted from the carved ceiling. The smell of gunpowder spread fast, bitter and metallic, swallowing the old scent of waxed wood. Behind the column, Roman kept his body angled toward the opening, pistol steady, eyes cutting through the dark where the passage bent toward the west wing. Then Clara tore her wrist from his hand. It was the first time she had ever pulled away from him with force, not from fear, but from certainty. Roman turned sharply, fury ready on his tongue, but it stalled when she dropped to one knee beside the dead attacker instead. Her fingers moved fast over the man's coat, his sleeve. The inside seemed near his shoulder holster. She was not panicking. She was searching. Another muffled footstep sounded deeper in the passage. Roman raised the gun again. Clara caught his forearm. Hard. He looked down at her, stunned less by the touch than by the command in it. Her face had changed. No trembling. No confusion. Only urgency sharpened into something almost fierce. She snatched the fallen man's lapel and turned it inward, revealing a strip of dark thread stitched in a crooked little pattern near the lining. 3 short bars. 1 long. Roman's jaw tightened. He had seen that mark once before, years ago, on crates moved through the river docks by men who never spoke names in public. Clara tapped the symbol, then struck her own chest twice with a flat hand. Then she pointed into the darkness ahead, not at random, but to the left wall, low, near the base molding. Roman frowned. A beat later, he understood. He fired once into the wood paneling. A cry burst from the dark. Not an attacker advancing, but a wounded man already hidden there, flattened behind the decorative wall cutout, waiting for them to rush forward. The body collapsed into view with a knife in one hand and a radio in the other. Roman froze for half a second. Clara had not heard movement the way an armed guard would hear it. She had recognized a pattern, not sound, intention. The room inside him went still. He turned back toward her, breathing harder now, and for the first time that night, he looked at her not as someone he had to shield, but as the only person in the corridor who understood the trap before he did. A soft vibration buzzed from the dead man's radio. Clara reached for it before Roman could stop her. A red light blinked. No voice came through, only two bursts of static, a pause, then one more. Clara's eyes lifted at once. She grabbed Roman's sleeve and pointed upward, toward the vent grate near the ceiling, then toward the grandfather clock hall beyond the secret exit. Roman's expression darkened. The radio pattern was not a message to speak. It was a signal to move. He didn't ask how she knew. He acted. They backed through the narrow passage, Roman covering the corners while Clara moved ahead this time, one hand gliding across the wall until she found the latch panel hidden behind a carved rosette. She opened it without hesitation. Of course she knew where it was. A maid who polished every room in the house learned where dust gathered and where it never settled. The panel swung inward with a groan softened by old velvet and hidden hinges, and a draft of colder air brushed Clara's face as if the house itself had exhaled. Roman moved behind her, gun lifted, shoulders squared against the dark, but this time he was no longer dragging her to safety. He was following where she led. The passage opened into a forgotten service room behind the winter parlor, a place lined with old ledgers, moth-eaten drapes, and shelves of silver polish gone hard in their tins. A single lamp burned on the desk, and beside it sat the thing everyone else had missed. A hearing aid, not Clara's, small, flesh-toned, recently used. Roman's eyes sharpened at once. He crossed the room, lifted it between two fingers, and understood before anyone said a word. The enemy under his roof had not merely watched him. He had listened. Clara's gaze dropped to the desk, then to the half-open ledger beneath the lamp. Her hand moved first. She turned the page and found a pattern of names, deliveries, security rotations, and payment marks hidden beneath fake housekeeping tallies. Detergent, linen repair, glass replacement, lies arranged in neat domestic columns. The betrayal had worn an apron. Roman's jaw locked, but Clara was already shaking her head. Not Marla, not this time. Her finger tapped a line item written every Thursday, always after the cook had left, always signed with the same crooked initial. Then she touched the hearing aid in Roman's hand and looked toward the servant's stairwell. The butler. He had spoken softly for months, feigned a harmless limp, and lowered his eyes like an old man who knew his place. But Clara had noticed what others had not. He never looked at people's mouths when they spoke. He never leaned in. He heard perfectly. And because everyone thought the deaf girl knew nothing and the old servant meant no threat, both of them had been left in the corners of rooms where truth grew careless. Roman went still for one beat. Then he understood what she had heard all along. Not sound, meaning. He signaled two surviving guards toward the stairs, but Clara caught his sleeve hard enough to stop him. Her other hand flew to the ledger, then to the wall clock, then to the narrow coal lift built into the corner. Her eyes were steady, urgent. Roman followed the logic. The butler had not gone up. He had gone down, toward the garage tunnel, where the remaining men would expect a clean escape. Clara turned the iron wheel herself. The coal lift gate rattled open. Roman gave no orders this time until after she had chosen the direction. Then he moved fast, taking the lower tunnel with his guards while Clara stayed behind the brick partition and pulled the emergency chain she had found while cleaning that room 100 times before. In the estate above them, bells began to scream through every hall. Red lights flashed. Steel fire doors dropped section by section, sealing exits, choking the route toward the drive. The trap reversed. For the first time that night, Clara was not being hunted. She was the one closing the house around the men who had used it. The butler made it only as far as the motor court.